let's try something new. Batch review of 4 fiction books, which I've read in the last 2 months or so. I haven't finished loads of books, actually. I've got several ongoing. So Starship Troopers, Robert A. Heinlein, Ray Bradbury, From the Dust Returned, David Drake, RCN2, Lieutenant Leary Commanding, and Robert W. Chambers, King in Yellow, Pushkin Press Edition, which is just the mythos stories, not the other stories from that collection. Starship Troopers, really good classic sci-fi novel, quite hard sci-fi novel. Definitely explores some and speculates on some issues like what will the future be like? What will be the game state of a pretty much post-scarcity human world, or relatively post-scarcity human world, in some respects, dealing with aliens. And what about how will technology affect warfare? Things like that. It's a military sci-fi about Johnny Rico joining the Space Marines, the mobile infantry, to fight the bugs. We have underpinnings of the world are great. We have a few alien species. We have technology described and speculated upon. We have humans have psychic powers sometimes. But really, that stuff is, generally speaking, fairly light in terms of, it's very good. It feels very deep. But really, this is about the value and honour due to the military. I think this is mostly where the fascism claim comes in. There's some stuff where I think Heinlein really thinks conflict is inevitable over resources, and essentially there's a kill or be killed thing there, and that can be taken in a particular direction towards something darker. But mostly he's a sort of a capital R realist. He's just saying, look, war happens. It's not very nice. He's very clear that it's not very nice. But the esprit de corps, the hard training, the valour of the infantry, of the armed forces, is valuable. And this is a bit of a pay-in to that, from the very hard basic training sequence to various conflicts and combats, to the finale or the finales, and the way in which relationships have progressed, the way in which I think the way in which we come to see that Heinlein honours all the people involved in this process. In all kinds of ways. He himself was a long-serving naval officer, had been in the National Guard, so served in 2 branches. Didn't see combat because of very serious health issues that meant he was retired before World War II. But he served as a Navy consulting engineer during the war. So there's maybe a tension there, but it's something where, I think you get a very authentic feel of the way in which how this experience might feel, not the experience of fighting bugs though, but of that actually fighting and stuff is less important than you'd think, but about the process of becoming a soldier, of having fellowship in the armed forces. Highly recommend. From the Dust Return, this is Bradbury's Elliot family, his Adams family. He and Charles Adams agreed to make a monster family each, and Adams never saw this completed work late in Bradbury's life, though the US edition does have an Adams cover, not this one. It's ghouls and ghasts, and they live in a house in America, and it's a sort of magical realist, if you want to put it that way. Very much a light, oddball fantasy take on them. There's some very good stories inside it because it's a fix-up of stories, and there's some very good fun characters. I really liked the stories I read that are now in this, fixed up to this, in October Country. It has a theoretical main character, a boy in the family with no powers, no monstrousness, but who can just remember and recall what's happening to them. It has some really interesting kind of use of the monstrous powers to represent, I guess, human frailties and needs. It's good, it's fun. It's on the frothier end of Bradbury, in terms of a lot of what you're enjoying is the lovely prose. He's really at his purple prose edge here. It's very, very, very enjoyable, but maybe a bit rich for some people. It's quite similar in feel to The Halloween Tree, and thematically it deals with some of the same things about belief in horror and monsters and good, and the way all these connect, and the way a materialist age reacts to that. It's good fun. Not an all-time great, but I enjoyed it a lot. I read it with my friend Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads. Third, RCN number 2, Lieutenant Leary Commanding. I like David Drake a lot. I like Hammer Slammers a lot. I liked the first book a lot in this series. This is 556 pages long. It's very readable, very fun. I like the main characters, Daniel and Adele, who've become friends in the previous one. Daniel now has command of his own spaceship. They use sails, basically rigging, to kind of help capture energy. So it's Aubrey Maturin. It's very explicitly Aubrey Maturin. Yeah, it's great fun, and there's a lot of twists and turns and some great combat scenes, and some good little mysteries or micro mysteries and tensions. There are some weird bad writing habits which were genuine star off, like the number of times you hear the same thought or set of thoughts repeated by Adele in her narrative monologue. You could save pages because we know, and the point needs to be developed, but you don't need to be reminded every chapter. And there's a tiny bit of that with Daniel too. There is a very strange problem. It's more a niggle than a real kind of massive problem, but it's something that you notice enough that you're getting annoyed, and that's not where any writer wants you to be. It's very good though, very fun, it's really quite good, let's say, and I will continue on to the next at some point. King in Yellow. This is the mythos stories. As I've said, this goes from Repair of Reputations to the Yellow Sign, and it's interesting this is 1890s. Some of it is nominally set in the 1920s or so, in a far future, kind of a speculative future that literally doesn't matter. You don't have to think about it at all. There's some stuff in Repair of Reputations about it that is essentially irrelevant, and then it's referenced back that maybe some other stories happen at the same time. Irrelevant. It's basically about this play that seems to, let's say, people of damaged moral character seem to be driven psychotic by it. That's the main thing. Except maybe it does connect to some sort of strange mythos creature in the stars, and maybe there are supernatural things happening in the story. Certainly there are a couple of things like an alchemical mix that turns things to stone, and a man who seems to be witnessed independently by other people who might be dead, his finger kind of, who's like essentially a zombie, but who might represent in some way the mythos creature, be there on his behalf. So there is beautiful prose. I mean, here I cannot forget Carcosa, where black stars hang in the heavens, where the shadows of men's thoughts lengthen in the afternoon. It's very striking, very atmospheric. Most of the stories actually work really well on their own. The first story, Repair of Reputations, kind of very suddenly ends. Just like, by the way, this is sort of 3 parts, but really the first 2 parts are 2 parts of a 4 or 5-parter. The third part is summing up what those would say. Otherwise, it generally paces itself fine. It has strong atmospheric conclusions. Some people do find that it doesn't deal with the mythos enough. It is indirect, that it's hinted at. Maybe this guy is a zombie or something. Maybe this person is actually being haunted by somebody murdered. But it's kind of hard to tell sometimes, and I think you're meant to find it hard to tell, that how far is this about decadence and insanity. You can see this as a Yellow Book publication, basically. How far is this really about decadence and insanity, and the mention of artists with damaged morals but a kind of longing for faith? How far is this Chambers writing about both himself and his experience in Paris particularly? It's very good. I'd certainly recommend it. I think you're not going to get as much bang for your buck for certain things on the pulp end, but then you don't really in a lot of Lovecraft. You do in some. So I think you're going to have to prepare yourself for that, but it's very, very good. So yeah, I mean, of these, I'd say Starship Troopers and King in Yellow are classics, and the other 2 were good fun. If you've read any of them, please tell me what you think about them in the comments, and I'll see you next time.